As ever, I could not really know what Gulab knew or how he had discovered what was happening. But right now he believed the Taliban had gone into the house where I had been staying and found I was missing. No one had betrayed me, and they had not dared to conduct a house-to-house search for fear of further alienating the people and, in particular, the village elder. This armed gang of tribesmen, who were hell-bent on driving out the Americans and the government, could not function up here in these protective mountains entirely alone. Without local support, their primitive supply line would perish. They would rapidly begin to lose recruits. Armies need food, cover, and cooperation, and the Taliban could only indulge in so much bullying before these powerful village leaders decided they preferred the company of Americans. That's why they just evacu- That's why they had just evacuated Sabre. They would still surround the village, awaited their chance to grab me, but they would not risk causing major disruption to the day-to-day lives of the people. I have been here for 5 nights now, including the night in the cave, and the Taliban had crossed the boundaries of Sabre only twice. Once for a few hours of the violent late-night evening, and once just now for maybe an hour. Gulab was certain they had gone, but he was equally certain we could not dare go back to the house. It was almost 10 in the morning by now, and Gulab was preparing to leave and take me with him, once more out into the mountains. It had passed midnight back in Texas, and the vigil at our ranch continued. The media was still voicing its opinion that the SEAL team was dead and that the latest call from Coronado had been received. There was still no news from me. They all knew there would be another call at 0400, and everyone waited out in the hot July night, their hopes diminishing, according to Mom, as hours ticked by. People were starting to speculate how I could possibly have survived if no one at the American base knew where I was, but news was really scarce, except for the part where some members of the media invented, and people were beginning to lose heart. Except, apparently, for Morgan, and the other SEALs, none of whom considered I was dead. At least that's what they always were told. MIA, they kept repeating. MIA. He's not dead until we say he's dead. Morgan continued to tell everyone that he was thinking about me and I was thinking about him. He was in contact, even if no one else was. And Senior Chief Guthrow kept a careful eye on my mom in case she disintegrated. But she remembers that night and to this day, and how their people were growing sadder by the minute, and how the SEALs held it all together, the chaplains, the officers, the non-coms, ordering, some imploring, but asking everyone to keep faith. Marcus needs you, Chaplain Trayvon told this large, disparate gathering, and God is protecting him. And now, repeat after me the words of the 23rd Psalm. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Solemnly, some of the toughest men in the U.S. Armed Forces stood shoulder to shoulder with the SEAL chaplain, each of them thinking of me as an old and, I hope, trusted friend and teammate. Each of them, at those moments, alone with his God, as I was with mine, half a world away. At 0400 the call came through the ranch from Coronado, and still no news. And SEALs started the process all over again, encouraging, sharing their optimism, explaining that I had been especially trained to withstand such an ordeal. If anyone can get out of this, it's Marcus, Chaplain Vaughn said, and he'll feel the energy in your prayers. And you will give him strength, and I will forbid you to give up on him, and God will bring you home. God will bring him home. Out there in the dry summer pastures, surrounded by the thousands of heads of cattle, the words of the Navy hymn echoed into the night. There were no neighbors to wake. Everyone for miles around was in our front yard. Mom said everyone was out there that night, nearly 300, and the policemen and the judges and the sheriffs and all the others joined Mom and Dad and the iron men from Spec Warcom, just standing there, singing at the top of their lungs. Oh, hear us when we cry thee, for seals in air and land on sea. Back in Sabre, Gulab and I were making a break for it. Clutching our rifles, we left our little mud rock redoubt in the lower street and headed farther down the mountain. Painfully, I made the 200 yards to a flat field, which had been cultivated and recently harvested. It was strictly dirt now, but raked dirt, as if ready for a new crop. And I had seen this field before, from the window of House 2, which I could see maybe 350 yards back up the mountain. I guessed the field was about the size of 2 American football fields, and had a dry rock border all around it. It was an ideal landing spot for a helicopter, I thought, certainly the only suitable area I'd ever seen up here. It was a place where a pilot could bring in an MH-47 without risking a collision with trees or rolling off the precipice and landing in the middle of a Taliban trap. For a few moments, I considered the writing, a large SOS in the dirt, but Gulab was anxious, and he half carried, half manhandled me out of the field, and back onto the lush mountain slopes, and there he found me a resting place at the side of the trail where I could take cover under a bush. And this carried a bonus, because the bush contained a full crop of blackberries, and I lay down there in the shade luxuriously eating berries, which were not quite ripe but tasted damn good to me. It was very quiet again now, and my trained sniper's ear, honed, perhaps, better than ever before, detected no unusual sound in the undergrowth. Not a snapped twig, not an unusual rustling in the grass, no unusual shadow behind a tree, nothing. We waited there for a short while before Gulab stood up and walked a little way, and then he turned and whispered, "We go now." I got a hold of my rifle and twisted onto my right side, ready to heave myself up, a movement that this week had taken a lot of concentration and effort. I don't know why it happened, but something told me to look up, and I cast my eyes to the slope behind us, and right there, sitting very quietly, his gaze steady upon me and betraying nothing, was Sharmak, the Taliban leader, the man I had come to capture or kill. I had seen only a grainy, not very good photograph of him, but it was enough for me. I was certain it was him, and I think he knew I knew. He was a lean character, like all of them, 40-ish, with long, black, red-flecked beard. He wore a black Afghan garb, reddish vest, and a black turban. I seem to recall he had green eyes, and they were filled with a hatred which would have melted a U.S. Army tank. He stared right through me and spoke not one word. I noticed he was unarmed, and I tightened my grip on my Mark 12 and very slowly turned it on him until the barrel was aimed right between his eyes. He was not afraid. He never flinched, never moved, and I had the most powerful instinct to shoot that bastard dead, right there on the mountain. After all, it was what I had come for, that or to capture him, and that last part wasn't going to happen. Sharmak was surrounded by his army. If I shot him, I would have not lasted 20 seconds. His guys would have gunned down both me and Gulab, and then, minus their beloved commander-in-chief, probably would have massacred the entire village, including the kids. I considered that, and rejected shooting him. I also considered that Sharmak was clearly not about to shoot me. The presence of Gulab made a complete standoff, and Sharmak not only was not about to call his guys to shoot the oldest son of Sabre village elder. Equally, I did not feel especially inclined to commit suicide. Everyone held their fire. Sharmak just sat there, and then Gulab nodded to the Taliban boss, who I noticed made an infinitesimal incline of his head, like a pitcher acknowledging a catcher's signal, and then Gulab walked slowly across to talk to him, and Sharmak stood up, and they turned their backs to me and moved farther up the mountain, out of my sight. There was only one subject they could possibly be discussing. Would the people of Sabre now agree to give me up? And I could not know how far Gulab and his father would still go to defend me. I just slumped back under that blackberry bush, uncertain of my fate, uncertain what these two mountain tribesmen would decide, because each of them, in his way, had so far proved to be unbending in his principles. The relentless killer, a man who saw himself as a warrior savior of Afghanistan, now in conference with the village cop, a man who seemed prepared to risk everything just to defend me.